Hey guys, it's Danny. Today we're gonna talk about 4 orchids which smell like chocolate. Yes, I'm not kidding. As you might know, orchids can have wonderful fragrances. Well, there are a few which actually smell like chocolate. Or at least that's what people say. And it just so happens that I have all 4 of them in bloom right now. Before we get to them, let me just start by saying that smell is a very personal thing. We don't all smell the same, nor do we see the same actually. So just because a lot of people say that something smells in a certain way doesn't mean you will detect it that way as well. However, statistically speaking, if a lot of people say that they detect a certain smell, there is a high chance you will detect it the same as well. I do have a video in which I elaborate a little bit more on this discussion and what influences how we detect fragrance, so I'll link it down below if you're interested in watching that as well. But for now, I think we're ready to start with our first orchid, which is, I believe, one of the most popular orchids on the market. The Oncidium Sharry Baby, also known as the chocolate orchid. Wonder why? Well, wonder no more. Because it smells like chocolate. Now, some people detect this fragrance as vanilla, other people as straight chocolate. Me personally, I think it smells more like milk chocolate than anything else. But for sure, it is a very sweet, delicious fragrance. It's not flowery at all. It literally smells like dessert. The Oncidium Sharry Baby is actually a typical Oncidium, and I do have a care tutorial for these orchids, a rather old video, but check it down below in the description. It is, in my opinion, one of the more forgiving and more robust Oncidiums. It appreciates a lot of moisture in the medium, a lot of bright light, but not necessarily direct sunshine. As a con to this orchid, the plant is actually quite big. The pseudobulbs can get massive, and overall you will have a monster within just a few years if everything goes according to plan. So this is one of those orchids which will require you to think a little bit about where you are going to place it. And not only will it become a very bushy orchid, but also a quite tall orchid. The leaves and pseudobulbs can reach 40 centimeters in height, maybe even 50 centimeters with older specimens, so from this point of view it can be quite problematic. But maybe it's a small price to pay for the wonderful fragrance. Just like other Oncidiums, this orchid produces a pretty long flower spike and a lot of very tiny flowers. It can branch out, and the flower spike can be quite long with very old specimens or very healthy specimens. Individual flowers don't last particularly long. You can actually have about a month or a little more of blooming time, but being that the orchid produces so many flowers, the blooming time can actually be extended, particularly if you have multiple flower spikes. The flowers are nothing to write home about, to be fully honest with you. They're generally a dark purple or burgundy color, but all of this is just overshadowed by the intense fragrance. This is a super fragrant orchid. It's so sweet that it can give you a headache. So if you are a person which has a sensitivity to strong and intense perfumes, this orchid is not for you, or you should not stay with this orchid in the same room because it will kick you out of the room in the daytime. In the nighttime, it really doesn't smell much, but definitely I cannot recommend this orchid for those of you who are sensitive to fragrances. There are multiple varieties of the Sharry Baby on the market. The most popular one is the Sweet Fragrance. It is the one you see here, but you can also find the Tricolor Sharry Baby, and you will see some images on the screen, and also the Ruby Doll, which is completely red. And as a little side note, this one was supposed to be the Ruby Doll, but being that we have white on the lip, and being that I did have a Ruby Doll in the past, I do believe this one is mislabeled, but it's okay. Fragrance-wise, they are all the same. And this has been the Sharry Baby, the most notorious fragrant orchid of them all, I believe. Whenever somebody hears the smell of chocolate, they cannot believe it, but once they sniff the flowers, they are in shock and awe. That's how similar this orchid smells to actual chocolate, or vanilla, depending what you detect. Next up, we actually have a hybrid of the Oncidium Sharry Baby. This is the Oncidium Heaven Scent. I have the variety Redolence. There are a few varieties of this orchid as well. And as you can see, it looks very similar to the Oncidium Sharry Baby, but the flowers are, in my opinion, a little bit more appealing because they have this contrast going on. They look like a panda, don't they? We can see clear similarities between the flowers of the Heaven Scent and the flowers of the Oncidium Sharry Baby, but luckily This hybrid obtained the beautiful mouth-watering chocolate fragrance that the Sharry Baby has. In my opinion, they are identical. I cannot detect a difference in intensity or in flavor, if I can call it like that. You might detect a slight difference, but in my opinion, it's not a whole lot, so you cannot say that, oh, you purchased one and it doesn't smell like chocolate. I think they are identical, if not almost identical, but the Heaven Scent has a few aces up its sleeves. First of all, the flowering is a lot more compact. One of the issues with the Sharry Baby is that the flower spikes can be very, very tall, but very sparse. And even though it's beautiful and it smells nice, wouldn't it be great if all the flowers would just stick in one place? Well, this is what the Heaven Scent does. The flowers generally are a lot more compact, and even though this orchid can produce pretty tall flower spikes as well, it can also produce branches, it's just not as unruly as the Sharry Baby and tends to stay more compact in its flowering habit. The flower shape really resembles that of the Sharry Baby, but I would say that the flowers are a little bit broader, just slightly bigger than the Sharry Baby. It looks a little bit more like a Wilsonara in my opinion, but we digress from the subject. There is a slight difference in the shape, but not a dramatic one. This one just tends to be a little bit more star-shaped. Coloring wise, there is a difference. We still have that beautiful burgundy or dark purple coloring, but we have white edging on the petals and sepals and also white edging on the lip, which creates a wonderful contrast, and in my opinion, these flowers are more attractive than the Sharry Baby. Now, just because the flowers are more compact doesn't really mean the plant is smaller or more compact as well. Actually, I do believe it's very similar in habit to the Sharry Baby. It produces large pseudobulbs, pretty long leaves, and with good care and in time it can become a pretty big orchid. I'm not 100% sure if it can reach the actual sizes of the Sharry Baby, but I do believe it will be close to that. So again, it's not a space saver, it will demand special place in your home, but if you like the flowers and more importantly you like the smell, then who cares about space, right? Just like the Sharry Baby, this orchid is fragrant during daytime. In the nighttime, there's nothing, but I do believe a break is welcome sometimes. P.S. I'll share with you down below in the description another video which talks about the growth pattern of Oncidium orchids. If you don't have much experience with Oncidiums but would like to have a chocolate orchid, do check that video out. They're very, very different than Phalaenopsis orchids, and you should know what to expect with them. But don't worry, they're very forgiving with beginners as well. The third chocolate orchid we're gonna look at today is the Era Calibri, recently reclassified as the Oncidium Calibri. I know this is a little bit confusing, so let's just call her Wilsonara. This is an Oncidium intergeneric, meaning that in its parentage we do have Oncidium orchids, but also the former Odontoglossums, which are related to Oncidiums, but they're very different. They do come from different regions, they have a different looking like pseudobulb and structure, and they also prefer cooler environments. So this is not really all that related to the Sharry Baby, but it does share a parent, and that gave the fragrance. So my orchid is not in its prime anymore, but we do have footage with the blooms. This orchid, in my opinion, smells exactly like the Sharry Baby in the redolence, but not so intense. The fragrance is sweet, chocolatey, beautiful, but you can only detect it if you actually stick your nose into the flowers. Whereas with the Sharry Babies, you can detect their fragrance from several feet, several meters away. When you enter the room, you can definitely detect the Sharry Baby. Not with this one. So maybe the Era Calibri is more suited for those of you who are actually a little bit sensitive to strong fragrances, but you don't mind actually smelling something chocolatey. Again, it smells in the daytime, and in the nighttime not so much, but this particular orchid doesn't really release its fragrance unless you have bright light. It's one of those more finicky fragrance releasers. And as I was saying, the fragrance is really, really mild. Maybe go with the Sharry Baby if you want intensity. If you just want something that will hint you at chocolate but not overwhelm you with the fragrance, I think this is the one for you. And I absolutely love the flowers on this orchid. Now, being that it is an Oncidium, it does take a lot in its care from the Oncidiums, so you do have a care tutorial down below, But with this one, I would not keep it in very high temperatures. I would make sure that the orchid never actually dries out. You can see that the pseudobulbs have this dark pigmentation. That's absolutely fine. It comes from the former odontoglossum orchids that it has in its parentage. So that is very, very normal. You can see that this is a big plant as well, but it will certainly not grow as big as the Sharry Baby. It will not produce as many flowers, as many branches. So don't expect the same vigorousness, let's say. I do consider this one to be just slightly more finicky, but definitely it's not hard to maintain. And if you live in a region of the world which is rather cool, I think the odontoglossum hybrids are perfect for you. They like bright light, but they absolutely hate high temperatures. Don't forget to water them whenever they're almost completely dry, and you should be good to go even with this one and other odontoglossums. And the fourth chocolate orchid we're gonna look at today is the Encyclia cordigera. This is not an Oncidium, not related. It's actually a Cattleya type orchid, and most people suggest that this orchid has a very chocolatey fragrance. I will be honest and say that to me it smells nothing like the Sharry Baby. I can detect indeed some sort of chocolate, maybe dark chocolate. I would say more of a cocoa fragrance to it rather than milk chocolate, but there are people who say there's a combination of chocolate and roses there. It is a beautiful fragrance indeed, but it's not like the Sharry Baby. It's a different, let's say, variety of chocolate. Now this orchid, as I was saying, is a Cattleya type, and I'll share with you down below both the orchid care video that I have on Cattleyas and also their pattern of growth. They are sympodials like the Oncidiums, but they're totally different beasts. These guys are more suited for warmer climates or warmer environments. They love bright light. Actually, they will not grow well without very bright light. And for most of them, there is no problem if they dry out quite a bit between waterings. They're extremely adapted to drought and very harsh conditions. They have very thick leaves, very thick cuticles, so with these guys I would not worry about humidity all that much, but I would try to maintain them, of course, hydrated and water them whenever they become bone dry. The Encyclia cordigera is, in my opinion, a very, very vigorous orchid. Even though not a pure Cattleya, this is not a hybrid, it is a species. And there are a few varieties of the species as well. Some of them have a dark purple lip, some of them a white lip. As you can see, mine has a purple veining pattern on the lip, and the fragrance is not obnoxious, but it's not mild like the Calibri. It's somewhere in between the Sharry Baby and the Calibri, I would say. I don't think you will have much issues with this orchid if you are sensitive to fragrances, because you cannot really detect it in a room. At least my individual definitely is not as strongly perfumed as the Sharry Baby. However, you don't need to go very, very, very close to the orchid to detect the fragrance. It's there, but not overwhelmingly sweet like the Sharry Baby. So this is a totally different beast that has chocolate vibes, and I think it's more suited for those of you who actually prefer dark chocolate. Not to mention, it is easy to grow, just a joy to actually have. It's not a very, very big orchid, but it's not a very tiny orchid either. It has more of a creeping nature. It will not grow super tall, but it will become bushy. It will grow more on a horizontal, and you will need to provide quite a large setup in time to accommodate for the pseudobulbs, which are typically round, and they can become quite big, like an onion. A small onion, that is. So here we have them, the chocolate orchids. Now these are just a few of them. I'm sure that there are other orchids which remind of chocolate. There are so many orchids and hybrids that one cannot simply have them all. So for this reason, I do encourage you to let us know down below in the comment section if you know of any other orchid which smells chocolatey. There are many orchids which have a very, very heavy sweet fragrance, such as the Sotoanum, which is the parent of the Sharry Babies, the Twinkles, even the Masdevallia glandulosa. But when it comes to the subtlety, I think these ones take the cake. And before I let you go, I just wanted to mention something. You guys know that I do have the Maxillaria tenuifolia, which supposedly smells like coconuts, and I never actually detected coconuts. Well, I gave the orchid to my boyfriend to smell, and I asked him, what does it smell like? And he said, well, I cannot really put my finger on it. So I asked, does it smell like coconuts? And he said, oh yeah. And then I said, doesn't it actually smells like sweet peaches, which is what I detect? And then he said, oh yeah, it smells like that too. It smells like both of them. So sometimes the fragrance can just be the power of suggestion. If you really, really are convinced that something smells in a certain way, Well, maybe it does for you. It just has to hint a little bit to that direction. So whether these orchids actually smell like chocolate or not, I'm not entirely sure. They might be vanilla, they might be milk chocolate, they might be just sweet, and that is it. So do take this video with a grain of salt. As I was saying, fragrance is very, very personal. Not everybody will like the same fragrances as you, and we need to understand that. But definitely as an orientation video, if you ever see these orchids for sale, do give them a sniff and let me know down below what they smell like to you. Alrighty guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Hope you've enjoyed it. You know the drill, like or dislike below. Subscribe to my channel for regular orchid videos, tutorials, Q&As, and other fun orchid subjects. And if you want to support my channel, do consider visiting the merch store down below. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!